Would Kusama's native token called KSM hypothetically go into the price of $200 during a hypothetical fully fledged type of altcoin season surprise me? It wouldn't actually, even though nothing I say is financial advice. The reason is because I think maybe Kusama has good fundamentals. And let me explain why I think so. It's because Kusama is basically a canary network to Polkadot. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, what is a canary network? Let me explain real quick. So usually projects that wish to launch on Polkadot, usually they're going to start off with Kusama first. Now, eventually, after they test out the project under real economic conditions, some do later move on to Polkadot. However, this is not a requirement because we see something like, for instance, Moonriver, that's on Kusama, right? So it's not like it's kind of forced to move on to Polkadot later, but then still, a lot of projects do kind of do this before eventually moving on to Polkadot. Now, why would a project start off with Kusama first? It's because when compared to Polkadot, Kusama is allegedly easier to make changes on, and also it's allegedly cheaper to rent building space when compared to Polkadot. So it's like basically, let's say I want to work out at a gym, or let's say I want to get a gym membership, right? It's kind of like getting a free trial. I test it out. If I like it, maybe I become a member. It's kind of like, test driving a car. I like it, maybe, I get a lease or I buy the car, whatever the case may be. So it's kind of like that, in a sense, at least the analogy that I would put when it comes to Kusama. But yeah, besides that point, people may be thinking, okay, when it comes to something like Polkadot, what is it even all about? Why does this even matter? Now, let me explain, because Polkadot, it's trying to connect blockchains together. It's focused on something called interoperability. Now, let me explain why this is even something that needs solving. It's because there's a lot of networks out there, a lot of blockchains, right? But then for a lot of them that I see, because in some cases they are independent of one another, they don't have this ability to send, data and value to each other, or should I say freely, right? So then as a result, if that is the case, then they lack interoperability. Like for instance, we take a look at something like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Because they're independent of one another, they cannot freely send data and value to each other. Arguably, they lack interoperability, and that's where something like Polkadot steps in. Again, it's focused on connecting blockchains together. The way you take a look at it is that when it comes to, Polkadot, I think it's actually trying to solve a problem that is actually there, because we see a lot of, projects out there lack interoperability, and if I'm just assuming that as the space grows moving forward, if there's going to be more blockchains, if there's going to be more networks, if there's just going to be more projects in general that are going to pop up, won't some of them want interoperability, right? That's the way you take a look at it. I mean, I'll just use a scenario and just explain kind of why I think this is kind of an issue. For instance, let's say I'm using AT&T, and then in a make-believe scenario, I cannot call my friend who's using T-Mobile because we're using a different carrier. Now, that problem doesn't exist, by the way. Again, this is just a make-believe scenario, but imagine if that situation was actually real. Like, for me, that would be kind of not good. You know what I mean? But then, of course, that doesn't exist. But then, because in this blockchain space, things are just kind of still relatively in, I would say, kind of the beginning stages in the grand scheme of things, because I don't think it is an industry that's been around for 50, 100 years or something like that, where, they usually have the issues kind of, improved. It's not the case here. A lot of these projects are just, been around for a couple of years or something like that. So again, I just kind of feel like, there's still a lot for improvement, a lot of room for improvement, I should say. So then something like Polkadot, I think, does play a crucial role. I think something like Kusama is kind of helping Polkadot. So the way I view it is that Polkadot, it's kind of like the Batman, and then Kusama's kind of like the Robin, That's the way to take a look at it. It's kind of like the sidekick, right? But even besides that point, let's say KSM, maybe, in a hypothetical scenario, went to the price of $200. Considering current circulating supply, market cap at that point would be nearly 3.4 billion. So let's just say for simplicity's sake, it's around 3.5 billion, right? Now that's around a 12.5x from here. Now some people may be thinking, okay, 12.5x, who cares about that? Well, let's take a look at Bitcoin. Is that doing that in the next 6 to 10 months? Is Ethereum doing that in the next 6 to 10 months? I just have a hard time believing that, because Ethereum at 10 grand, less than a 3x. Bitcoin at 300 grand, less than a 3x from here. So again, I'm not talking about like what could Bitcoin or Ethereum do in 10 or 15 years. I'm saying in the next 6 to 10 months. So if someone said, hey, for the next 6 to 10 months, I can only choose one, KSM, Bitcoin, or Ethereum. I cannot make a choice for anybody, by the way. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. But in my personal situation, in my perspective, I would actually choose KSM instead of those two because, unless I'm happy with around a 2x, give or take, right? Slightly more than that, then that's a different case. But that doesn't excite me. That's just the way I take a look at it. So when it comes to KSM, it just has to be the winner for me when compared to those two, even though I do not only hold KSM, right? I mean, I have other projects in my portfolio, but if I only had those three options, I'm just going to have to choose KSM because it's an altcoin, way lower market cap. I get it. It may not have the stability of like an Ethereum or a Bitcoin, but for me, again, in the next 6 to 10 months, I'd rather just believe in this personally, in my perspective, not speaking on anyone's behalf. But here's the way to take a look at it as well. $200, again, market cap, considering current circulating supply, around 3.5 billion. I mean, Dogecoin exceeded this by over, 20 times back in 2021, which was kind of like, even crazy to think about, but I'm just saying. Shiba Inu exceeded this by over 10 times in terms of market cap back in 2021. I am not saying Kusama is going to gain that sort of attention like them, but this just doesn't seem too ridiculous in my perspective, especially when I consider kind of the trajectory in which Polkadot is heading. It doesn't seem that ridiculous to me, but it's just a waiting game for me because I'm just dollar cost averaging, holding and just waiting, and I get it. The price of KSM hasn't been doing good, historically speaking, like in the past 6 months to a year. Not too long ago, it kind of did showcase a glimpse of, a little bit of brilliance, but then, of course, generally speaking, KSM didn't do that good overall, so in my opinion, you know what, even so, despite that, I'm going to be dollar cost averaging because I don't think the market cap is like too massive, where the growth just seems, or should I say the hypothetical growth seems like kind of bad, to me at least, but then it's not like a micro cap where I just don't really want to get into that to begin with, so it's just kind of this balance in between for me. But even besides that, why am I still waiting right now? It's because there's over 600 million crypto owners currently, whereas back in the peak of the 2021 bull run, there was around 300 million crypto owners. And that was during the peak of that bull run. I get it, there's more competitors now, but a lot of these competitors, I should say, they're these meme coins that, really don't have that good fundamentals, right? There's just a bunch of launch pads, people keep launching random meme coins. Many of them just never really make it in a sense. So for me, yes, there's more competition right now when compared to back in 2021, despite more crypto owners right now, but I don't think there's such a drastic amount of new, good, actually fundamentally amazing projects in my perspective. Even though there's more, I don't think there's such a drastic amount. So if the bull run that year looked that impressive with that amount of crypto owners, what would it look like maybe if we do ever see a fully fledged type of altcoin season this cycle? That's just my perspective. Not to mention, when I take a look back in history, historically speaking, altcoins typically, as a worst case scenario, they usually peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. Now, 18 months from the last Bitcoin halving event, which happened in April of last year, is around October this year. We're not in October yet. So in my opinion, maybe the race might not be over, hypothetically. So then, in my opinion, I'm just going to stay patient. Now, that's just a date based off history. There is no telling if it's going to happen this time around. But whenever, let's say it maybe does, if it ever does, I want to just be holding, waiting, and that's pretty much it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll greatly appreciate it. It's Malik the Captain. I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.